Day 1, a mother Stegosaurus with 3 babies, happy, protected, thriving. Day 2, that same Stegosaurus with no babies, just grief and emptiness. Day 3, that same Stegosaurus with 2 babies again, but they're not hers. They're not even her species, but she doesn't care, because a mother doesn't stop being a mother just because her children are gone. Let me take you back 150 million years, to the late Jurassic period. This was North America, a landscape of vast plains dotted with conifer forests and fern meadows. This was the age when some of the most iconic dinosaurs walked the earth, and among them was a Stegosaurus we'll call Shield. Shield was 30 feet long from nose to tail. 5 tons of armor, muscle, and maternal instinct. Her body was distinctive. 4 massive bony plates running down her back, alternating on either side of her spine, possibly for temperature regulation or display. And at the end of her tail, 4 sharp spikes, each 2 feet long, capable of swinging with devastating force. But despite her impressive defenses, Shield wasn't a fighter. She was a mother, and on day 1 of our story, she had everything a Stegosaurus mother could want. 3 healthy babies, each about 3 months old, roughly the size of large dogs. They were born in early spring, and now in the warm summer months, they were thriving. The babies stayed close to Shield at all times. They were vulnerable. No plates yet, no tail spikes, just soft hide and the instinct to stay near their mother. Shield was their world, their protector, their teacher, their source of safety in a dangerous landscape. That morning, Shield led her babies to a fern meadow, a safe feeding ground she had used for years. The babies played while she ate, occasionally nibbling at soft plants themselves, learning what was good to eat. Shield watched them constantly. Every movement, every sound, her senses were attuned to danger. The snap of a branch, the rustle in the undergrowth, the distant call of a predator. But that day, danger came from where she wasn't looking. From above. Allosaurus were the apex predators of the Jurassic. 35 feet long, 2 tons of muscle and teeth, and they were smart, patient, strategic. This particular Allosaurus had been watching Shield's family for 3 days, studying their patterns, waiting for an opportunity. And that afternoon, he found it. Shield had wandered slightly downwind to reach a particularly lush patch of ferns. Just 50 feet. Just for a moment, her babies were visible. She could see them, but she couldn't smell what was creeping through the tall vegetation behind them. The Allosaurus struck with terrifying speed. He targeted the smallest baby, the easiest kill, the one farthest from Shield. Shield heard the scream and spun around, but she was too far, too slow. Stegosaurus were built for defense, not speed. By the time she reached the scene, her smallest baby was dead. The Allosaurus had already killed it with a bite to the neck. Shield roared and charged. Her tail swung with the force of a sledgehammer. One of the spikes caught the Allosaurus in the leg, tearing a deep gash. The predator retreated, dragging his kill with him. Shield couldn't pursue. She still had 2 babies to protect. Babies that were now screaming in terror. She gathered them beneath her body, standing over them like a living fortress, tail ready to strike at anything that approached. The Allosaurus disappeared into the forest with his kill. Shield stood guard over her remaining babies for hours, not moving, barely breathing, just protecting. When night fell, Shield led her 2 surviving babies to a rocky area where they could shelter against a cliff face. Only one direction to defend. They huddled together in the darkness. The babies were traumatized, crying softly. Shield couldn't comfort them the way a mammal might. She could only stay close, stay alert, stay alive. That was day 1. 3 babies in the morning, 2 babies by nightfall. Day 2 started with a sense of wariness that hadn't been there before. Shield was more cautious, more protective. She kept her babies even closer, barely letting them out of touching distance. But trauma makes you careful. It doesn't make you safe. The attack came at midday. A different Allosaurus, younger, more aggressive. He'd scented Shield's group and saw opportunity. A mother with babies, distracted by grief and fear. He attacked from the front this time, a bold daylight assault. Shield saw him coming. She positioned herself between the predator and her babies. Her tail swung in wide arcs, creating a barrier of deadly spikes. The Allosaurus dodged, weaved, looking for an opening. And while Shield focused on the threat in front of her, she didn't see the second predator, a juvenile Allosaurus, smaller, faster, coming from the side. A coordinated ambush. The juvenile grabbed one of Shield's babies and ran. Shield spun, her tail swinging wildly, catching the juvenile across the ribs. The predator dropped the baby and fled, wounded but alive, but the damage was done. Shield's baby was badly injured. Deep puncture wounds in its side, bleeding heavily. It cried out in pain. Shield drove away the adult Allosaurus with a brutal tail strike to the jaw, then immediately went to her injured baby. She nuzzled it gently, trying to encourage it to stand. It couldn't. Shield stayed with her injured baby for 6 hours. She stood over it protectively, keeping scavengers away. She called to it softly, the way Stegosaurus mothers do. She tried everything she knew, but there was nothing she could do. The wounds were too severe. Internal damage. Blood loss. Her baby died as the sun set. Shield bellowed, a sound of grief that echoed across the plain. A sound that had no words but carried every emotion of loss. And then there was just one. One surviving baby out of 3. One tiny, terrified creature that had watched both its siblings die. Shield gathered her last baby close. She didn't sleep that night. She just stood guard, watching the darkness, waiting for the next attack, knowing it would probably come. This was day 2. 2 babies in the morning. 1 baby by nightfall. And a mother slowly breaking under the weight of loss. Day 3 started with a decision. Shield couldn't stay in this area. Too many predators, too much death. She needed to move, find somewhere safer, somewhere her last baby might survive. She headed toward the forested hills to the north, an area with denser vegetation where ambush would be harder. Her baby followed close behind, never more than a few feet away. They traveled for most of the morning. Shield was exhausted. She hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. Hadn't slept, but she pushed forward because she still had 1 baby. One reason to keep going. And then she heard it. A cry. High-pitched, desperate. Frightened. Not from her baby, from somewhere else. Shield stopped. Her instincts told her to ignore it, to focus on her own offspring, to not investigate strange sounds in the forest. But it sounded against her better judgment. Shield moved toward the sound. Her own baby followed nervously. She found them in a small clearing. 2 baby dinosaurs, much smaller than her own. Different species entirely. Dryosaurus, small bipedal herbivores, maybe 2 weeks old, barely 2 feet tall. And they were alone. Their mother's body lay nearby, killed recently, probably overnight. A Ceratosaurus had found her, killed her, and apparently deemed the babies too small to bother with his prey. They'd been left behind, alive but orphaned. The 2 baby Dryosaurus were huddled against their mother's cooling body, crying. They were too young to understand death. They just knew their mother wasn't moving, wasn't protecting them anymore. Shield stared at them. They weren't her species. They weren't even similar to Stegosaurus. They were tiny, fragile, completely different. Every rational instinct said to walk away. She had her own baby to protect. Taking on more responsibility was dangerous, foolish. They weren't hers. But then one of the baby Dryosaurus looked directly at her and cried out. The same kind of distress call her own babies had made, and something in Shield broke, or maybe fixed. It was hard to tell the difference. She couldn't save her own babies, but maybe Maybe she could save these. Shield approached slowly. The baby Dryosaurus were initially frightened. She was enormous compared to them, an intimidating armored giant. But they were also desperate for any kind of protection. Shield lowered her head and made the soft rumbling sound she used with her own babies. A comforting sound. A "you are safe" sound. The baby Dryosaurus hesitated, then slowly approached. They were so small they could walk under Shield's belly without even ducking. Shield's own baby watched this with what might have been confusion, but it accepted the newcomers without aggression. And just like that, Shield had babies again. Not hers, but babies nonetheless. The first challenge came almost immediately. The baby Dryosaurus tried to follow Shield the way they'd followed their mother, walking on 2 legs, keeping pace easily. But they were weak from lack of food and water. They kept stumbling, falling behind. Shield had to slow her pace dramatically. Stegosaurus walked on 4 legs at a steady, plodding pace. Dryosaurus moved in quick dashes on 2 legs. The gaits were completely different. Shield adapted. She walked slower. She stopped frequently to let them rest. When they fell too far behind, she would turn around and wait, rumbling encouragement. The second challenge was food. Shield's baby ate the same plants she did, tough, fibrous vegetation. The Dryosaurus babies needed softer plants, easier to digest. Shield found herself searching for different food sources, guiding the little ones to tender shoots and soft leaves. She was learning to mother a different species, and they were learning to trust a mother who looked nothing like them. That night, Shield found a defensive position against a cliff face. She positioned her body to block the only approach. Tail ready, and beneath her, huddled together, were 3 babies. One Stegosaurus baby, 2 Dryosaurus babies, an impossible family, but a family nonetheless. This was day 3. Started with 1 baby, ended with 3. The following weeks were a masterclass in adaptation. They communicated differently than her own species. More vocal, more active. They chirped when hungry, squeaked when frightened, purred when content, and they were prey animals in a way Stegosaurus weren't. Stegosaurus had armor and weaponry. Dryosaurus had only speed and hiding. These babies couldn't defend themselves at all. Shield became hypervigilant. She slept in shifts, an hour on, an hour off. Her tail spikes were stained with blood from 3 separate predator encounters in the first week alone. A Ceratosaurus got too close one night. Shield's tail caught it across the face, shattering teeth. It fled, and Allosaurus tried to snatch one of the Dryosaurus babies. Shield charged, despite her size disadvantage, using her armored bulk as a battering ram. The predator decided the meal wasn't worth the risk. A pack of juvenile carnivores attempted a coordinated hunt. Shield stood her ground for 2 hours, tail swinging constantly, until they gave up and left. She was wounded in each encounter. Scratches, bites, bruises. But she never retreated, never abandoned her position. Because beneath her were babies, and mothers don't abandon babies. The Dryosaurus babies bonded with Shield completely. They followed her everywhere, slept pressed against her legs, called to her when separated even briefly. To them, she wasn't a different species. She was just mom. Even Shield's own baby seemed to accept the arrangement. It played with the Dryosaurus babies, gentle, despite being 3 times their size. They became a unit. An unlikely family, but family nonetheless. As the weeks turned into months, the babies grew. Shield's Stegosaurus baby developed its first small plates. The Dryosaurus babies got stronger, faster, more independent, but they still stayed close to Shield. Even as they gained the ability to survive on their own, they chose to stay. Because bond isn't about biology. It is about who was there when you needed them. Shield's body showed the cost of her choices. She had new scars from predator attacks. She'd lost weight from the stress and constant vigilance. Her plates were chipped in places from impacts. But she never wavered, never showed regret. Because when she looked at the three babies, so different from each other, so dependent on her, she saw purpose, meaning, a reason to endure. 6 months after she found the Dryosaurus babies, Shield was resting in a meadow, while the three youngsters played nearby. They were bigger now, more capable. Shield's own baby was half her size. The Dryosaurus babies were about 3 feet tall, long-legged and quick. A young female Stegosaurus wandered into the meadow. She saw Shield's family and stopped, confused. She could see the Stegosaurus juvenile, clearly Shield's offspring. But the 2 Dryosaurus, what were they? The young Stegosaurus approached cautiously. The Dryosaurus babies immediately ran to Shield for protection, chirping in alarm. Shield positioned herself between the stranger and all 3 babies, even though the stranger was the same species. Even though there was no threat, because to Shield, all 3 babies were hers to protect. The stranger Stegosaurus seemed baffled. She stared at the Dryosaurus babies, then at Shield, as if trying to understand. And then she simply moved on, leaving Shield to her unusual family. Because in the Jurassic, as in any time, love doesn't always make sense. It doesn't always follow rules. It doesn't always care about species or biology or what is normal. It just is. A year after Shield lost her own babies, the 3 youngsters were approaching independence. Shield's offspring was nearly adult. Sized, the Dryosaurus pair were fully grown, sleek and fast. And one morning, they left, not because Shield drove them away, not because they stopped caring, but because it was time. Time to find their own territories. Time to find mates. Time to become adults. The Stegosaurus juvenile left first, heading toward a distant herd. It called back to Shield once before disappearing over a hill. The Dryosaurus pair stayed 2 days longer, as if reluctant to leave. But eventually, they too departed, running together toward the forest. Shield watched them go. She didn't call them back, didn't follow. This was the natural order. Babies grow up. They leave. That is success, not failure. But she was alone again. For the first time in over a year, there were no babies sleeping against her legs. No small voices calling for her. No tiny bodies to protect. Shield returned to her solitary life. Stegosaurus were mostly solitary creatures anyway, coming together only to mate and raise young. This was normal. But for weeks, Shield found herself looking for the babies, listening for their calls, turning to check on them only to remember they were gone. Grief for the dead. Emptiness from the departure of the living. It all felt similar. But there was something else too. Something that hadn't been there before the babies. Pride. Shield had raised 3 babies through one of the most dangerous periods of the Jurassic. 2 different species, with different needs, different behaviors, and all 3 had survived to independence. That wasn't failure. That was triumph. Several months later, Shield was foraging near a river when she encountered one of the Dryosaurus she had raised. He was with a mate now, fully adult, living his own life. He saw Shield and stopped. For a moment, they just looked at each other. The massive armored Stegosaurus and the small, quick Dryosaurus. And then, the Dryosaurus did something unusual for his species. He approached Shield, got close enough to touch, and made a soft chirping sound. The contentment sound he'd made as a baby. A sound that meant safe, happy, home. Shield rumbled back. The gentle sound she'd made to comfort frightened babies, the sound that meant, I am here. You are protected. You are loved. The moment lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then the Dryosaurus returned to his mate, and they moved on. Shield watched him go, then returned to her grazing. She never saw him again. Never saw any of the 3 babies again. That is not how wild animals work. They move on. They build new lives. They don't return to their parents. But for one brief moment, there had been recognition, acknowledgement, gratitude, and maybe that was enough. Shield lived for another 10 years after that encounter. She never raised babies again, her own or anyone else's. That chapter of her life was closed. But she carried the scars from that year. Physical scars from the predator attacks, mental scars from the loss and the stress, but also something else, something harder to name. A sense of having done something that mattered, something that defied the usual rules of nature. Because most Stegosaurus mothers raised their own babies. That was normal. That was biology. But Shield had raised babies that weren't hers. Babies that didn't even look like her. Babies that she chose to protect. Not because instinct demanded it, but because grief and love and the need to nurture something demanded it. And in doing so, she had demonstrated a truth that transcends species and time. Motherhood isn't just biology. It is choice. It is commitment. It is the decision to protect and nurture regardless of logic or convenience, or whether the baby is yours. Shield's own babies died. That was tragedy. Nature's cruelty. But 2 other babies lived because she chose to mother them anyway. That was triumph. Shield's choice, and maybe, in the end, that is what motherhood really is. Not just the biological drive to protect your own genes, but the conscious choice to care for the vulnerable, whoever they are, because they need you and you are there. And you can. Shield couldn't save her own babies from the predators, but she saved someone else's. And those babies, so different from her, so wrong, according to biology, thrived because of her. That is not a story of loss. It is a story of love that transcends the normal boundaries. Love that doesn't ask if it makes sense. Love that just acts. Because a mother doesn't stop being a mother just because her children are gone. She just finds new children to protect, even when they're not hers, even when they're not even the same species. Because love doesn't care about those details. It just cares about the crying baby in front of you, and whether you are going to walk away or stay. Shield chose to stay, and 3 babies survived because of that choice. That is all motherhood ever really is. Choosing to stay.